My name is Lauren Parker, and I used to believe that love had to look a certain way to be real. Tall man, tall dreams, a tall future. Then I met the person who taught me love can be small and strong at the same time, like a hand that fits yours perfectly. His name is Noah Reed. He is a little person. My family called him a dwarf to mock him, but he prefers little person, and I do too. This is the story of how they laughed at me for loving him, and how, on our wedding day, his secret made their hands shake, their lips go dry, and their voices fall to pieces. The church lights were warm and soft, the kind that make every face look kind for a second. Our guests stood in neat rows like a forest of black suits and pastel dresses. The music faded. My father, Thomas Parker, held my arm as we walked down the aisle. He was stiff, like he was pushing a heavy door with his chest. On the left, I saw my mother, Diane, with her lips pressed thin, like a line drawn with a ruler. My older sister, Ashley, rolled her eyes, so hard I thought they might get stuck. Cousins whispered. Uncles smirked. Someone in the back snorted a laugh when Noah turned to face me at the altar. He was in a fitted navy suit, tie perfect, hair neat, eyes bright and steady. He looked like home. The officiant smiled and lifted the book. He was about to speak the first words when a door at the side of the church opened. A hush fell over the aisle like a sheet. Two people in dark suits stepped in. Everyone turned. I felt my father's grip loosen. Noah's eyes flicked from me to the side door, then back to me, calm and sure. The two people did not sit. They did not smile. They stood near the aisle, watching my family, not me. Before we begin, Noah said, raising his hand politely, his voice carrying clear and even, I have a few words. The whispering started again, thin and sharp, like paper cuts. My mother's hands tightened around her bouquet. She was smiling that cold smile she saved for neighbors she didn't like. Ashley folded her arms and smirked at Noah, like she was at a comedy show. Noah's best man, a quiet man I had met only once, stepped forward. He placed a small black folder in Noah's hand. I had never seen that folder before. Noah opened it with care, like he knew it better than his own reflection. He took a breath. The room went still. Even the flowers seemed to wait. My love, he said to me, I promised you truth. I promised you safety. I promised to keep you safe even if it makes others angry. He turned his head slow, steady, and looked at my parents. Today is the day I keep those promises. My father's face changed color, like the sky before a storm. My mother dropped her bouquet. Roses hit the carpet and rolled against her heels. Ashley whispered, Oh my God. Noah lifted a single sheet from the folder. The two people in dark suits moved closer to the front pew where my family sat. My father took a half step back. He had never stepped back from anything in his life. And then Noah said 9 words that made the church colder than winter. You already know me. You just don't know you do. The whole room drew breath at the same time. I could hear it, one soft, gasping wave. Noah held my eyes for a second. I saw love there, and something else, careful fire. He turned the paper so my parents could see the heading. I could not see it from where I stood. My father reached up to adjust his tie, but his fingers were shaking. My mother whispered my father's name like a prayer and a warning at once. That was when the side door opened again. This time it was not 2. It was 4. They walked in, slow and certain, and stood behind the first 2. One of them carried a flat white box. The lid had a silver seal. She did not speak. She only looked at my parents the way a clock looks at the last seconds of an hour. Pastor, Noah said calmly, may we take 5 minutes before vows? The pastor nodded, eyes wide. Someone coughed. A baby somewhere fussed. My aunt's pearl necklace rattled against her throat. Noah closed the folder. He looked at me again, softer now, and mouthed, It's okay. I believed him. I also didn't. My heart pounded like a fist on a locked door. My hands were cold. I felt the old urge to fix things, to smooth the air, to make my parents smile, so the world would feel safe. But under that urge was something new. It was small and strong, like a seed that knows it will be a tree. It said, Stand still, Lauren. Let truth do its work. Noah turned to my family. Mr. and Mrs. Parker, he said gently, this is for you. He reached out his hand. The woman with the white box stepped forward and gave it to him. He set it on the front pew, in my mother's lap. My mother stared at the seal like it might burn her. My father did not touch it. He kept his hands at his sides, fists tight, knuckles pale. Open it, Noah said. My mother did not move. Open it, he said again, still calm but firmer. She lifted the lid with shaking fingers. Inside was a stack of printed pages and a small black flash drive. On top, a photo. At first I didn't understand it. Then I saw. And as my eyes found the details, I watched the color drain from my mother's face until she looked like the white roses at her feet. My father swallowed hard. His jaw bit down like he was chewing a nail. My sister, curious and impatient, leaned over. She took in the photo and jumped back like she'd been stung. Dad, she breathed, voice tiny. What is this? Noah did not answer. He didn't need to. The silence answered for him. It reached down inside the people who had laughed at him, and it started to shake them. And that was the moment my family's hands began to tremble. Stop the ceremony, my father barked suddenly, but his voice cracked, thin as old wood. The pastor looked at Noah, then at me, then at the people in dark suits. No one moved. A single rose petal slipped from my mother's lap and landed on the carpet like a tear. Noah closed the folder, slid it under his arm, and looked at me again with eyes that said there was more, so much more, coming. Mr. Parker, he said, still gentle, you recognize it. You know what this is. My father opened his mouth, then shut it. His throat worked, but no sound came. And then, before any of us could take another breath, one of the dark-suited people stepped forward, held up a badge, and said in a clear, careful voice, "We should speak now." The church gasped again, louder this time. My mother squeezed the white box until the cardboard groaned. My father took a step as if to run, then stopped, stuck in a net only he could see. I felt the world tilting under my feet, like a boat turning toward a storm. What was in the photo? What was on those pages? Why did the badge look both like a shield and a hammer? I didn't know. Not yet. I only knew that the laughing had stopped. All at once. Like someone had taken the sound out of the room with a hand. That was how the highest point began. Our vows frozen. Our guests silent. My family's hearts beating so loud I could hear them from the altar. It was the moment Noah's secret rose like a wave no one saw coming, and it was about to crash. But you need to know how we got here. I met Noah on a rainy Tuesday in June at a small coffee shop in Columbus, Ohio. I was late for work and my umbrella had flipped inside out. I was trying to shake water from my hair when I slipped on the wet tile and almost went down. A hand caught my elbow, steady, warm, certain. I looked down and saw a man with kind eyes looking up at me. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so," I said, trying to laugh. "You don't have to pretend to be fine," he said softly. "You can say ouch out loud. It's legal in all 50 states. I laughed then, for real. He handed me a napkin. I noticed his shoes first. Clean, practical, good leather. Then his suit, simple but perfect. Then his height. I noticed it the way you notice the color of a door before you knock. You see it, you accept it, you go on. He sat at a corner table with a laptop and a notebook full of neat, tiny handwriting. He asked if I wanted to sit until the rain passed. I did. We talked for 20 minutes that felt like 5. I told him I worked as a receptionist at an orthodontics office but dreamed about going back to school for social work. He told me he fixed things for people who didn't know how to ask for help. That is how he said it, and I smiled at the poetry of it. He asked for my number. I wrote it on the napkin. When I stood to go, I slipped again because of course I did, and he caught me again. "See," he said. "Legal in all 50 states. On our first date, a waiter put the menu in my hands and handed Noah a children's menu without looking. Noah smiled, handed it back, and asked for the wine list in a voice so calm and sure the waiter turned red and apologized 3 times. On our second date, a stranger in the parking lot used the word midget and laughed. Noah did not raise his voice. He did not insult him back. He said, "I'm a person, not a joke," and he looked the man in the eyes until the man looked away, small and ashamed. I felt something settle inside me then, like a compass finding north. The first time I brought Noah to my parents' house, my mother gave him a smile that did not reach her eyes and a plate with only 2 chicken wings on it, like he must eat less because he took up less space. My father called him Buddy 3 times in 1 hour. My sister took a photo of us from across the room and sent it to our family group chat with a row of laughing emojis. My phone buzzed under the table. I did not laugh. When Noah left that night, my mother stood at the door with me and said, "Sweetie, you can have anyone." "Why this?" "Because he treats me like a person," I said. "Not like a project or a mirror." My father said, "He will make your life harder, Lauren. People will stare. Neighbors will talk. Think of your future children." "Dad," I said, "our future children will learn kindness faster. That's a win." He shook his head. "You're being emotional." "I'm being human," I said. They did not hear me. Or maybe they heard me but did not care. The next week, Ashley posted a meme on Facebook, a tall bride bending to kiss a short groom with a caption that said, "When you settle for less." My aunt commented 3 laughing faces. My cousin added, "At least she won't need a step stool." My mother did not comment, but she called me and asked if I really wanted to do this to the family. I hung up and cried on my couch until my eyes hurt. Noah came over with soup, sat on the floor beside me, and told me a story about a small violin that made a stadium cry. I asked him if the story was true. He said, "If it comforted you, it's true enough." When we announced our engagement, my father said, "Over my dead body," and then he said he was joking and poured himself another drink. My mother pretended to faint into a chair. Ashley texted me, "So, does he stand on a box for the kiss?" A week later, my grandmother, June, called me and said, "Honey, love is rare. Hold it with both hands and let everyone else watch." I pressed the phone to my heart after she hung up and whispered thank you into the quiet. The months after that were a slow war. My family said they would not pay for a church because it would be a circus. So Noah and I paid. They said they would not invite their friends because they didn't want to explain. So we invited ours. My mother told the caterer to go easy on the portions for the smaller guests. I fired the caterer. My father made jokes about step stools and camera angles. I moved my seat at dinner to another table and fed myself grace instead. I learned to bend without breaking. I learned to speak without begging. But I also noticed things about Noah that were quiet and strange. He always took calls in another room. He had meetings that sounded like courtrooms and warehouses. He knew how to read the shape of a lie on a face. He asked simple questions that made people tell the truth without knowing why. When I asked him what he did exactly, he smiled and said, "I fix things for people who can't ask for help." I told him that was not a job description. He said, "I can show you more than I can tell you." I said okay. He kissed my forehead like a promise. The night before the wedding, I slept at my grandmother June's house. She rubbed my hair like she used to when I was little. "You sure?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "He's good to me." "Then the rest is noise," she said, and fell asleep in her chair with the TV on low. In the morning, my mother sent a text that said, "You can still come to your senses." Ashley sent one that said, "Don't trip on the aisle. Short husband can't catch you." My father did not text. He sent a short wire transfer with a note line that read, "For a decent dress." I wore the dress I had chosen months ago, the one that made me feel like light. And then the church, the aisle, the hush, the side door, the dark suits, the white box, the photo, my mother's hands shaking, the present slamming into the past until sparks flew. Now, we were back in the hot center of the moment. The woman with the badge had just said, "We should speak now." The whole room felt like it was holding its breath underwater. "Please," the pastor whispered, voice dry. Noah didn't move from the altar. "In a moment," he said. "After this." He reached into his jacket and took out a small, square remote I had never seen. He pressed his thumb to it. A soft click echoed from the speakers. The big screen at the front of the church, the one we planned to use later for photos, lit up. My father jerked, as if someone had thrown cold water at him. My mother said my father's name again, but this time it broke in the middle and fell apart at her feet. On the screen, a video opened to a timestamp and a date I knew too well. The frame was my father's office. The angle was high from the corner where the ceiling met the wall. I did not know there was a camera there. I did not know anyone knew there was a camera there. My father stood behind his desk with two men I had never seen. My mother sat in a chair, purse on her lap. Ashley leaned in the doorway, nibbling her nail. The two men held out a folder, very much like the one on my mother's lap right now. My father laughed. My mother said, "No one will ever trace it." Ashley asked, "How soon do we get the money?" The church made a sound then, a sound I had never heard a room make. It was like air being pulled out through a straw. People drew back. Someone whispered, "Oh, God." The dark-suited woman stepped closer, and the badge caught the light again like a coin at the bottom of a river. My father lunged forward, hand outstretched, as if he could grab the moving picture from the air and crush it. The two men from the side door moved, quick and sure, and my father froze where he stood, chest heaving. My mother tried to stand, but her knees knocked against the pew, and she sat again, hard. "Turn it off," she cried, voice too loud, too late. Noah's thumb hovered over the remote. He looked at me, and for a second, everything in the room fell away. It was only us, two people who had chosen each other against laughter and doubt. "I told you I fix things," he said softly, "and I promise to keep you safe." And then the church doors flew open at the back. A wave of flashing red and blue spilled in from the steps outside. Sirens sliced the air, closer, closer, then off, leaving the echo inside like a hot wire. Every head turned. Every hand reached for something to hold. The officers started down the aisle. The church doors burst open and the sound of boots echoed against the polished aisle. Uniformed officers stepped inside, their badges glinting under the chandeliers. The guests gasped, clutching purses and children, pressing back into the pews as if the air itself had become dangerous. I froze. My bouquet slipped from my hands, petals scattering across the floor like broken promises. I looked at Noah, my Noah, standing tall in his small frame, calm as though he had been expecting this moment all along. His thumb still hovered near the remote, the paused frame of my family's secret frozen on the giant screen behind us. My father's face had drained of all color. His fists clenched so tightly I could hear the faint pop of his knuckles. My mother was whispering to herself, frantic, rocking slightly in the pew. "Ashley?" She was pale, wide-eyed, but her phone was in her hand, her thumb flying across the screen, probably texting someone, maybe even live updating the family group chat about the disaster unraveling before their eyes. The lead officer stepped forward, his voice carrying through the tense silence. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker, you are under investigation. We need you to come with us." The church erupted. Some screamed, others gasped, some tried to stand for a better view. My grandmother June gripped her cane so tightly her knuckles turned white, but her chin was raised in quiet pride. My father shot to his feet, slamming his hand against the pew. "This is madness. On my daughter's wedding day? You have no right." His voice cracked, trembling, not with anger alone, but with fear. Noah spoke then, soft but firm. "They do have the right. You know they do." My father whirled on him, his face twisted, spit flying as he pointed at Noah. "You planned this. You set us up." Noah didn't flinch. He didn't even raise his voice. "You set yourself up a long time ago, Mr. Parker." Today, the truth simply walked through the door. The officers moved closer, two reaching for my father's arms. He struggled, cursing, shouting that he'd ruined Noah, that this was a frame-up. My mother screamed and clutched at the white box in her lap, holding it as if the secrets inside could shield her from what was coming. Ashley stood suddenly, tears streaking her mascara. "This isn't happening," she whispered. "This can't be happening." She looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw no mockery in her eyes, only raw, naked fear. And then, just when I thought the moment couldn't grow any heavier, one of the officers turned toward me. "Miss Parker," he said, voice steady, "you may want to step aside. There's more you don't know." The entire church seemed to tilt. My breath caught in my throat. More? What more could there possibly be? My heart thundered in my chest, and I could feel the eyes of every guest drilling into me, waiting to see what I would do. I looked at Noah. His eyes, calm, fierce, unwavering, met mine. He gave the smallest nod, as though to say, "Trust me. Stay strong." I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, the giant screen flickered again. The paused frame disappeared, replaced by another video file. My mother gasped so loudly the whole church heard. My father stopped struggling. Ashley dropped her phone. And there it was, something so shocking, so damning, that every person in the room leaned forward without realizing it, as though the truth itself had pulled them closer. The screen began to play. And that's when the real nightmare started. The video began grainy at first, as if it had been pulled from an old security feed. Then it sharpened, the audio cracking before it settled. The date stamped in the corner of the footage was unmistakable. 2 years ago, on a night I remembered clearly. My birthday. The frame showed my parents' living room. I recognized the wine-colored rug, the glass coffee table, the family portrait hanging crooked above the couch. My father sat at the table with 2 men in business suits. My mother was pacing, arms folded tightly across her chest. Ashley stood behind them, chewing gum, her phone glowing in her hand. One of the men slid a document across the table. "If you want the offshore account cleared," he said, "you'll need to sign. It's the only way the transfer goes through." My father leaned forward, pen in hand, and said words that made my stomach twist. "Lauren will never find out. She's too naive. She thinks we're just middle class scraping by. But once this clears," he grinned, "we'll never have to pretend again." The church fell silent, so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. I staggered back a step. My throat closed up. My parents had lied. My entire life, they'd made me believe money was tight, that I was selfish to want new shoes, selfish to ask for college tuition, selfish to dream. They had mocked Noah for being beneath us, when all along they were hiding their own rot behind a polished mask. My grandmother June stood then, her cane tapping the floor like a gavel. Her voice, though frail, cut through the church. "I knew it. All those years you let this girl suffer while you lined your pockets. Shame on you." My mother gasped, shaking her head violently. "No, it's not true. This is twisted. It's edited." "Edited?" Noah asked, his voice calm but edged like steel. "You just heard his voice. You just heard yours." The guests murmured louder now. Some turned in their seats, whispering. I saw one of my cousins cover her mouth with both hands. Another aunt shook her head in disbelief. My father's jaw worked furiously, but no sound came out. That was when Ashley snapped. "So, what if it's true?" she shouted, her voice shrill. "So, what if Dad did it? At least he provided for us. At least he made sure we had a roof. You think anyone cares about you, Lauren? You think this dwarf," she jabbed a finger toward Noah, venom in her eyes, "makes you look strong? He makes you look pathetic. You're just a joke like him." The words sliced deep, and for a moment the sting burned. But before I could respond, Noah spoke, his tone measured, his eyes fixed on her. "Funny," he said quietly, "because I'm the one who saved your life." The church gasped again, louder this time. Ashley froze, her mouth hanging open. What are you talking about?" she stammered. Noah stepped down from the altar. Each click of his shoes on the marble floor echoed like a drum. He stopped in front of Ashley, not breaking eye contact. "Do you remember the night you went to that club on the west side? The night you blacked out in the alley?" Ashley's face turned ghostly pale. "I do," Noah continued, voice soft but merciless. "Because I was there. Because I pulled you out before things got worse. Because I made sure no one ever laid a hand on you that night." The church erupted again. Gasps, whispers, even cries of disbelief. My aunt clutched her chest. My cousin muttered, Oh my God. Ashley's lip trembled. She stumbled back into the pew, nearly knocking over a vase of flowers. She couldn't speak. The air in the room shifted. The smugness that had wrapped around my family like a blanket was gone, shredded into pieces. What replaced it was raw fear, shame, and something even heavier, truth. And just when the guests began to think they'd seen the worst of it, Noah lifted the remote again. "There's more," he said simply. The screen flickered, the file changing. Another video queued up. The officers exchanged a look. My father lunged forward again, shouting, "Enough! Turn it off! Turn it off now!" But Noah pressed play. And what appeared on the screen next made the entire church erupt into chaos. The screen blinked, and another video file began to play. This one wasn't from a home camera or an office security feed. It was from a hospital. The date in the corner made my breath hitch. It was from 3 years ago, a night I remembered because it was when I had begged my father to help me pay for Grandma June's medical bills. He had said there was no money, that she'd just have to manage with the basics. But the video showed something else entirely. My father stood at a hospital reception desk, speaking with a doctor in a white coat. The doctor slid a folder across the counter. My father opened it, his eyes glittering, and then reached into his jacket. He pulled out an envelope, thick, heavy, stuffed with cash. He pressed it into the doctor's hand. "Not a word to anyone," my father said in the video, his voice sharp. "Especially not to my daughter. She doesn't need to know where this money goes." The doctor hesitated. "But the treatment." "Forget the treatment," my father snapped. "I'll decide how my money is spent. And it won't be wasted on an old woman who should have written her will years ago." My grandmother's cane clattered to the floor in the church. Her whole body trembled. "You monster," she whispered, her voice shaking with rage and heartbreak. "You let me suffer while you paid off strangers?" The guests erupted. Some gasped, some cried out, some muttered furiously under their breath. One of my uncles actually stood, shouting, "Thomas, is this true? Did you let your own mother rot while you were playing with money?" My father's face twisted, red with fury. "This is a trick," he roared. "It's fake, all of it. Some editing scam. He's making this up." But even as he spoke, the next frame played. It showed a clear shot of him signing a document, the doctor's hand shaking as he accepted the envelope. The camera caught the ink of his signature. There was no denying it. I looked at my father, the man who had always told me to respect him, to obey him, to believe he knew best. He looked small now, smaller than Noah had ever looked in their eyes. His suit hung on him like armor that no longer fit. His hands trembled so badly that the veins stood out, swollen and blue. My mother finally broke. She stood, her voice cracking like glass. "Stop this, Noah. Please. Whatever you're trying to prove, you've done enough." She turned to me, tears streaking her cheeks. "Lauren, baby, you don't understand." I stepped back, my hands shaking, my chest tight. "No, Mom," I said, my voice raw. "It's you who doesn't understand. You lied. You laughed at me, mocked me, made me feel ashamed of the only person who's ever truly loved me, and all the while, you were drowning in your own filth." The church fell silent. Every eye was on me now. I felt the weight of it, but I didn't flinch. Ashley, still pale, finally found her voice. "This is insane," she muttered. "You're ruining everything. She stopped when Noah turned toward her again, calm and unshaken. "There's more," he said quietly. The screen flickered again. This time, it showed a different kind of footage. Grainier, darker. A parking garage. My father's car rolled into frame. He stepped out, looking around nervously. Then another figure approached him, a man in a black jacket. They shook hands, exchanged a briefcase. My father popped it open just enough for the camera to catch the flash of neatly stacked bills. "Payment received," the man said. My father nodded. "And you'll handle the rest?" The man smirked. "Consider it done. By tomorrow, no one will ask questions." The video ended. The silence that followed was deafening. The pastor's hands trembled so badly he nearly dropped his book. My grandmother gasped and clutched at her chest. Guests shifted uneasily, some muttering that this had gone far beyond family drama. This was criminal. The lead officer stepped forward again, his voice sharp now. "Thomas Parker, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. And after what we've just seen, there may be more charges coming." The church exploded. Screams. Gasps. Some people even rushed to the aisles, pulling out phones, recording. The very guests who had mocked Noah only an hour ago now sat stunned, their laughter gone, their faces pale. My father tried to lunge again, but two officers grabbed him, yanking his arms behind his back. My mother sobbed, clutching at him, but another officer held her back. Ashley collapsed into the pew, her mascara smearing down her cheeks, her hands covering her mouth. Through it all, Noah stood calm, steady, watching the storm he had unleashed. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't gloating. He looked resolute, like a man who had carried a burden for too long and finally set it down. I turned to him, my voice shaking. "Noah, what is all of this? How did you know?" He met my eyes, and for the first time that day, I saw a flicker of something heavy, something he had been carrying alone. "Because, Lauren," he said softly, "this isn't just about your family. It's about mine, too." The guests gasped again. My heart lurched. His family? What do you mean?" I whispered, my hands tightening around the bouquet I had picked up again, without realizing. Noah opened the black folder once more, pulling out a single photo and holding it high so everyone could see. The image was sharp, damning, unforgettable. My mother gasped. My father stopped struggling for the first time. Ashley's jaw dropped. And in that single photo was the secret that tied everything together. The church erupted in chaos again. The photo in Noah's hand seemed to glow under the church lights. My pulse pounded in my ears as the guests leaned forward, craning their necks to see. My father went rigid, my mother's lips parted in shock, and Ashley shook her head violently as if denial alone could erase what was staring us in the face. The picture showed my father standing beside the man in the black jacket from the parking garage footage, but this time, he wasn't exchanging money. He was signing a contract. And next to him in the photo, smiling faintly, was another man. A man who looked strikingly like Noah. My chest tightened. What is this?" I whispered. Noah stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying the weight of thunder. "That man," he said, pointing to the younger figure in the photograph, "was my brother, Ethan. 3 years ago, he disappeared after doing a job your father forced him into. We searched everywhere, but there was no trace. Until I started digging." The church filled with gasps. My grandmother covered her mouth. My mother gripped the pew so tightly her knuckles turned bone white. My father's face drained of all color, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled out of water. "No," he croaked. That's not true." But Noah ignored him. His eyes were locked on me, steady and unflinching. "Lauren, the reason I always said I fix things for people who can't ask for help is because I've been working undercover. I've been trying to uncover what happened to my brother. And every trail led back here, to your family." A collective murmur swept through the pews, sharp and jagged. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Another guest whispered, "This is insane." I staggered back a step, the room tilting around me. My family had something to do with Ethan?" Noah nodded, his jaw tight. "Your father used him. Your mother covered it up. And Ashley," he turned his gaze on her, cold as steel. "Ashley knew." The church froze. Every eye shot to my sister. Ashley leapt to her feet, her voice shrill. "No, that's not true. I didn't know anything." She looked around desperately, tears streaming down her face. I was just following Dad's orders. I didn't know what he'd done until it was too late. My stomach dropped. My knees went weak. She had admitted it. Not fully, not directly, but enough. "You liar," my grandmother June's voice rang out, shaking with fury. "All these years, mocking Lauren, calling Noah names, laughing behind their backs, you knew the whole time? You knew what your father did. Ashley's sobs tore through the air. She collapsed onto the pew, burying her face in her hands. The officers looked at one another, then back at Noah. One of them spoke. "Mr. Reed, if you have more evidence linking the Parkers to your brother's disappearance, we'll need it now." The guests gasped again, louder than before. People shifted uneasily, clutching purses, fanning themselves with programs. Some even got up to leave, overwhelmed by the storm unraveling before them. But Noah didn't flinch. He held up the folder. "Everything is here. Every document, every recording, every signed contract. Today was not just about vows, Pastor." His eyes softened when they turned to me again. It was about truth. And justice. I felt my world tilting, splitting. My family wasn't just cruel, they were dangerous. They weren't just liars, they were criminals. And now the whole church knew it. The lead officer stepped toward my father, who stood frozen in place, sweat beading on his forehead. "Thomas Parker, you're coming with us. Now." But just as the officer reached for him, my father's mask shattered. He exploded. "You'll regret this," he roared, his voice echoing through the church like a gunshot. He swung his fist, knocking the officer back. My mother screamed. Guests ducked, some shouting in panic. The other officers lunged forward. My father grabbed a candle holder from the altar and swung it wildly, knocking flowers to the ground, sending candles clattering. Chaos erupted. People screamed and scattered, shoving into the aisles, rushing for the doors. The pastor shielded himself behind the pulpit. My grandmother cried out as someone nearly knocked her over. And in the middle of it all, Noah moved, not away, but forward. He placed himself between me and the chaos, his body small but firm, steady as a wall. His hand reached back, gripping mine, his voice calm even as the storm raged around us. "Stay behind me, Lauren," he said. "No matter what happens." My heart pounded. The room was spinning. My father's eyes were wild, his face twisted with rage, the candle holder raised high as officers closed in. And then, just as he swung, just as the chaos reached its breaking point, something happened that none of us could have expected. The doors at the back of the church slammed open once more. And standing there, silhouetted against the blinding daylight, was a figure no one thought we'd ever see again. The church went silent. My father's arm froze mid-swing. My mother collapsed into the pew. Ashley's scream tore through the air. And Noah's grip on my hand tightened, his voice trembling with a mix of fury and relief. "Ethan." The church froze as if someone had hit pause on the world. The figure in the doorway stood still, framed by sunlight, his shadow stretching across the aisle like a bridge between the past and the present. My breath caught, my throat tightening. It was him. Ethan. Noah's brother. The resemblance was undeniable, same strong jawline, same steady eyes, though Ethan's were harder now, sharpened by whatever hell he had survived. His clothes were plain, travel-worn, his face thinner, marked with faint scars that told stories no one in the room yet understood. The candle holder slipped from my father's hands and clattered against the marble floor. The sound echoed through the church, sharp as a gunshot. My mother's sobs filled the silence. Ashley pressed her hands against her face, shaking her head like she wanted to disappear into the pew. Noah whispered the word again, his voice breaking this time. "Ethan?" For the first time all day, I saw Noah lose his composure. His lips trembled, his eyes glistened, his chest rose and fell quickly. He took one small step forward, his grip loosening on my hand. But Ethan didn't move closer. His gaze swept the church, cold and piercing. When his eyes landed on our parents in the front pew, his jaw clenched so tightly the muscles twitched. "You thought I was dead," Ethan said, his voice hoarse but steady. "Didn't you, Thomas? Diane? You thought you'd buried me under your lies." The church erupted. People gasped, some cried out, some clutched each other as if witnessing a ghost. The pastor staggered back against the pulpit. My grandmother let out a sob, so deep it shook her whole body. My father stammered, his voice cracking. This is a trick. You can't be." Ethan's lip curled. You paid to have me silenced. You thought I was gone for good. But here I am, alive, and ready to tell the truth. The officers turned instantly, their eyes wide. The lead officer stepped forward. Mr. Reed, if what you're saying is true, we need to hear everything right now. But my father snapped, his mask breaking completely. Lies. All of it lies. He lunged toward the aisle, shoving past an officer, but another grabbed him by the arms, wrestling him back. Guests screamed, scrambling further from the chaos. Ethan didn't flinch. His eyes burned with fire. He pulled a thin folder from his jacket and held it high. This, he said, is everything. Names, dates, bank accounts. The night your father tried to use me, and the night he tried to erase me. It's all here. The room shook with murmurs, a tide of voices crashing against one another. The guests who had come to laugh at Noah and me now sat pale and wide-eyed, their whispers sharp and frantic. Ashley sprang to her feet. Stop it, she screamed, tears streaking her face. You're ruining everything. Dad only did what he had to. No. Ethan cut her off, his voice like a blade. He did what greedy men always do. And now it's over. The officers moved fast, pulling handcuffs from their belts. My father fought like a wild animal, thrashing, shouting Noah's name with curses, spitting venom at Ethan. You'll regret this. Both of you. I'll take you all down with me. But his words were swallowed by the sound of metal locking around his wrists. The guests gasped. Some cheered quietly under their breath. Others shook their heads in disbelief. My mother collapsed fully onto the pew, sobbing into her hands, rocking as though the truth might undo her. Ashley sat frozen, her face pale, mascara smeared into black rivers down her cheeks. And in the center of the storm stood Noah, his eyes locked on Ethan. For a long, painful moment, neither spoke. It was as if the world had shrunk to just the two of them, two brothers torn apart by secrets, standing on opposite shores of the same river. Finally, Noah whispered, I thought I lost you. Ethan's expression softened, just barely. You almost did. His gaze flicked toward my parents. Because of them. Tears burned in my eyes. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on me, heavier than any secret I had ever carried. My family, the people who had mocked me, belittled me, tried to control me, had been hiding rot so deep it almost destroyed another family completely. And now, in front of everyone, it was unraveling. But just when I thought the storm had peaked, Ethan took a slow breath, and his next words set the entire church spinning again. This isn't over, he said, his voice low and steady. Because there's someone else involved. Someone sitting in this very church. The guests froze. Heads turned. Whispers rose like a wave. My stomach twisted. Someone else? Here? Ethan's eyes swept the room once more. And then he lifted his hand, pointed straight at someone in the pews. The church gasped in unison. My pulse raced. My vision blurred. Because the finger he pointed wasn't at my father. It was at Ashley. The church became a living storm. Gasps, shouts, the shuffle of feet, the heavy hum of panic. Everyone's eyes swung toward Ashley as Ethan's fingers stayed locked on her like a spotlight. My sister's face drained of color. She shook her head violently, her lips trembling. No. No, it's not true, she screamed, her voice cracking under the weight of every pair of eyes staring at her. She stumbled back against the pew, clutching at the wood as if it could hold her up. He's lying. He's lying to all of you. But Ethan's gaze didn't waver. His jaw was tight, his voice calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Ashley Parker was the one who made the call, he said. The call that told them where I'd be that night. The call that nearly cost me my life. The words cracked through the air like thunder. My knees went weak. Ashley? My voice was a whisper, barely audible above the chaos. My heart hammered as if trying to break free from my chest. Ashley spun toward me, her eyes wide, desperate. Lauren, don't you believe him? He's twisting everything. I would never hurt anyone. I'm your sister. Her words tumbled out in a rush, her hands shaking so badly that her phone slipped from her grasp and clattered to the ground. Ethan stepped closer, his voice sharp. "You took the money, Ashley. Do you want me to show them the transfers? Do you want me to play the recording?" Gasps rippled through the pews. People craned their necks, muttering, whispering, the tide of suspicion already rising against her. "No," Ashley shrieked. Her tears streaked black across her cheeks. "I didn't know what Dad was planning. I thought it was just business. I swear I didn't know." But the way her voice cracked betrayed her. The way her eyes darted, searching for escape, gave her away. And the guests saw it. They knew. My grandmother June rose slowly from her seat, her cane tapping the floor like a judge's gavel. Her voice shook with fury. "Ashley Parker, you were supposed to protect your sister. Instead, you sold another family's son for your father's greed." Ashley's sob turned into a wail. She collapsed onto her knees, clutching at the hem of her dress, begging, "Please, Grandma, please. I didn't mean to. I thought it was nothing, I thought." But Ethan cut her off, his voice like steel. "You thought wrong. And because of you, I spent 2 years in the shadows, hunted, running, fighting to stay alive. Because of you." The officers stepped forward again, this time not toward my father, but toward my sister. The church erupted into shouts, some defending her, others crying out that justice had to be done. My mother screamed and lunged forward, but an officer blocked her path, holding her back. And me? I stood frozen. My sister. My own blood. The one who had laughed the loudest at me and Noah, who had mocked us, who had humiliated me at every chance. She had also been the one to betray Ethan. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. My bouquet slipped from my hands again, petals scattering like pieces of my childhood trust. Ashley's screams echoed through the church as the officers gripped her arms.
"No.
Let me go. Lauren, please. Tell them I would never do this to you. Tell them I'm innocent." Her eyes locked on mine, wide, wild, begging. For the first time in years, I saw not my cruel sister but a terrified little girl, clinging to me like she had when we were young. But I couldn't save her. Not this time. Noah stepped forward, his hand finding mine again, steady and firm. His voice was calm, resolute. "Lauren doesn't owe you anything anymore, Ashley. Not after everything you've done." Ashley's sobs tore through the air as the officers pulled her to her feet. My mother collapsed beside her, screaming her name, pounding the floor with her fists. My father, already cuffed, twisted and shouted until the officers forced him down onto the pew. The guests sat in stunned silence, their faces pale, their whispers sharp. The laughter that had once filled their throats at my expense was gone, replaced now with a taste of fear, of shame, of secrets unraveled. And just as the weight of it all began to crush me, Ethan spoke again, his voice quiet but sharp enough to slice the silence. "This isn't just about the Parkers. There's another name in these files. Someone even closer. Someone who isn't family by blood, but who's been standing in the shadows this whole time." The church gasped. My breath caught. Noah's grip on my hand tightened. His eyes flicked toward Ethan, then toward the back of the church. And when Ethan finally spoke the name, the room erupted once more. The name fell from Ethan's lips like a thunderclap, shaking the church into chaos. Pastor Green. For a moment, no one moved. The air itself seemed to thicken, heavy and suffocating. Then, like a wave breaking against rocks, the gasps erupted. People twisted in their seats, eyes flying toward the man who had stood at the altar for decades, baptizing babies, marrying couples, preaching every Sunday about faith and truth. Pastor Green's face turned ashen. His lips trembled, his hands shaking so badly the Bible nearly slipped from his grasp. That's a lie," he stammered, his voice brittle. "Ethan, son, you don't know what you're saying. You've been through so much. Maybe your mind is." "Don't." Ethan cut him off, his tone sharp, cold. "Don't pretend not here. Not today. You knew everything. You were there when the deal was signed. You blessed the money. You prayed over their lies as if God wouldn't notice." The church roared. People shouted, cursed, some stood to leave. Others pointed at the pastor, their faces twisted with betrayal. No, no, I would never. Pastor Green clutched his chest, sweat beading on his forehead. I've served this congregation for 30 years. Why would I risk everything? Ethan's expression was merciless. Because they paid you. Because you thought no one would ever find out. But I did. He pulled another document from his folder and held it high. The projector hummed, flickering to life again. On the screen appeared an image of a signed receipt, Pastor Green's name, his handwriting, his signature in black ink. Below it, the Parker family's account transfer. The church erupted again, louder this time. Voices collided, some crying out in disbelief, others shouting angrily, demanding answers. No, the pastor cried, his voice cracking. It's not what it looks like. I was tricked, misled. I didn't know what I was signing, but no one believed him. The truth had teeth, and it was tearing through every lie in its path. I felt my knees buckle. My entire life, every Sunday sermon, every Bible verse he'd preached, every word of guidance, was built on rotten soil. I had trusted him, confided in him, believed him when he said my marriage to Noah was a mistake. And now this. Tears stung my eyes. I looked at Noah, whose jaw was tight, whose hand held mine like an anchor. He whispered, "This is what they do, Lauren. They build walls of respectability to hide the filth inside. But walls always crack." The officers moved forward again, surrounding Pastor Green. He tried to back away, clutching the pulpit like a lifeline, but his legs shook too badly to hold him steady. "No, please," he begged, his voice breaking. "I'm an old man. I made mistakes, but I didn't mean harm. Tell that to the lives you ruined," Ethan snapped, his voice slicing through the pastor's plea. The guests were on their feet now, some shouting, others filming, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The entire church was a storm, a tidal wave of betrayal crashing down all at once. And in the middle of it, Pastor Green's mask slipped completely. His face twisted, his voice hardened, the trembling gone. "You don't understand," he shouted, his words echoing off the stained glass. "You think your family was the only one? You think you're the only victims here? Half the people in this room benefited from my silence. Half of them knew." A hush fell. The storm paused. My heart slammed against my ribs. What did he mean? I turned slowly, scanning the pews. Eyes darted. Faces went pale. Whispers rose like smoke. And in that suffocating silence, I realized this web of lies stretched further than my parents, further than Ashley, further than even Pastor Green. The truth hadn't just cracked the walls. It was about to bring the entire church crashing down. The church was suffocating in silence, every soul frozen under the weight of Pastor Green's words. His chest heaved, his eyes scanning the room with a wild gleam, as though he'd finally been cornered and decided to take everyone else down with him. "You sit there," he spat, pointing his trembling hand at the congregation, acting shocked, clutching your pearls, whispering behind your hands. "But you all knew. You knew where the money came from. You knew why the Parkers suddenly had power, why they could fund events, buy silence, hold their heads high while others starved." Gasps rippled like a wave. Guests turned on each other, whispers rising, accusations already forming. "You, Mr. Carter?" Pastor Green barked, pointing at a man in the third pew, his face red and slick with sweat. "You took their money to expand your business. You smiled in Lauren's face while mocking her fiancé behind her back." The man stuttered, his wife grabbing his arm, but the crowd's eyes had already cut into him like knives. "And you, Mrs. Whitmore," the pastor shouted, his voice echoing off the stained glass windows. "You accepted donations for your son's scholarship, money soaked in greed and lies." Mrs. Whitmore gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "That's not true. I didn't know." But her protest was drowned out by the roar of voices around her. The church was chaos again. People stood, shouting, some defending themselves, others pointing fingers. The neat rows of family and friends had turned into a battlefield, each pew erupting with noise. I clutched Noah's hand, my heart hammering, my mind spinning. This wasn't just about my parents anymore. It wasn't just about Ashley or Pastor Green. This was bigger, far bigger. My whole community was stained. The very people who had laughed at me, who had sneered at Noah, who had told me I was lowering myself by marrying him, they were all tangled in the same corruption, feeding off it, pretending their hands were clean. Ethan stepped forward, his voice slicing through the chaos. This is what happens when lies rot long enough. They spread. They infect everyone. And now the infection is out in the open. The officers moved toward Pastor Green, but he laughed bitterly, a sound that sent chills up my spine. You think arresting me will end this?
No.
This whole town is built on secrets. And today, his voice rose, manic, wild. Today the walls come down. And with that, he did something no one expected. He grabbed the edge of the pulpit and heaved it forward. The heavy wood crashed onto the marble floor, the sound deafening. Papers, candles, and glass scattered across the altar. Screams erupted as guests surged back, knocking over pews, clutching children, rushing toward the doors. Officers tackled Pastor Green to the ground, his shouts muffled as they forced his arms behind his back. But the damage was already done. Panic filled the church like smoke, choking, blinding, unstoppable. In the middle of the chaos, Noah pulled me close, his voice steady in my ear. Lauren, listen to me. This isn't just about them anymore. This is about you. About us. About whether you'll let their poison break you, or whether you'll rise above it. Tears blurred my vision. But Noah, it's my family. My church. My whole life. It's all lies. He cupped my face, his eyes fierce and unshakable. Then let's build something new. Something real. They try to shame us, but now their shame is burning them alive. And we will walk out of here stronger than ever. The church gasped. My breath caught. Noah's grip on my hand tightened. His eyes flicked toward Ethan, then toward the back of the church. And when Ethan finally spoke the name, the room erupted once more. The name fell from Ethan's lips like a thunderclap, shaking the church into chaos. Pastor Green. For a moment, no one moved. The air itself seemed to thicken, heavy and suffocating. Then, like a wave breaking against rocks, the gasps erupted. People twisted in their seats, eyes flying toward the man who had stood at the altar for decades, baptizing babies, marrying couples, preaching every Sunday about faith and truth. Pastor Green's face turned ashen. His lips trembled, his hands shaking so badly the Bible nearly slipped from his grasp. That's a lie, he stammered, his voice brittle. Ethan, son, you don't know what you're saying. You've been through so much. Maybe your mind is. Don't. Ethan cut him off, his tone sharp, cold. Don't pretend not here. Not today. You knew everything. You were there when the deal was signed. You blessed the money. You prayed over their lies as if God wouldn't notice. The church roared. People shouted, cursed. Some stood to leave. Others pointed at the pastor, their faces twisted with betrayal. No, I would never. Pastor Green clutched his chest, sweat beading on his forehead. I've served this congregation for 30 years. Why would I risk everything? Ethan's expression was merciless. Because they paid you. Because you thought no one would ever find out. But I did. He pulled another document from his folder and held it high. The projector hummed, flickering to life again. On the screen appeared an image of a signed receipt, Pastor Green's name, his handwriting, his signature in black ink. Below it, the Parker family's account transfer. The church erupted again, louder this time. Voices collided, some crying out in disbelief, others shouting angrily, demanding answers. No, the pastor cried, his voice cracking. It's not what it looks like. I was tricked, misled. I didn't know what I was signing, but no one believed him. The truth had teeth, and it was tearing through every lie in its path. I felt my knees buckle. My entire life, every Sunday sermon, every Bible verse he'd preached, every word of guidance, was built on rotten soil. I had trusted him, confided in him, believed him when he said my marriage to Noah was a mistake. And now this. Tears stung my eyes. I looked at Noah, whose jaw was tight, whose hand held mine like an anchor. He whispered, "This is what they do, Lauren. They build walls of respectability to hide the filth inside. But walls always crack." The officers moved forward again, surrounding Pastor Green. He tried to back away, clutching the pulpit like a lifeline, but his legs shook too badly to hold him steady. "No, please," he begged, his voice breaking. "I'm an old man. I made mistakes, but I didn't mean harm. Tell that to the lives you ruined," Ethan snapped, his voice slicing through the pastor's plea. The guests were on their feet now, some shouting, others filming, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The entire church was a storm, a tidal wave of betrayal crashing down all at once. And in the middle of it, Pastor Green's mask slipped completely. His face twisted, his voice hardened, the trembling gone. "You don't understand," he shouted, his words echoing off the stained glass. "You think your family was the only one? You think you're the only victims here? Half the people in this room benefited from my silence. Half of them knew." A hush fell. The storm paused. My heart slammed against my ribs. What did he mean? I turned slowly, scanning the pews. Eyes darted. Faces went pale. Whispers rose like smoke. And in that suffocating silence, I realized this web of lies stretched further than my parents, further than Ashley, further than even Pastor Green. The truth hadn't just cracked the walls. It was about to bring the entire church crashing down. The church was suffocating in silence, every soul frozen under the weight of Pastor Green's words. His chest heaved, his eyes scanning the room with a wild gleam, as though he'd finally been cornered and decided to take everyone else down with him. "You sit there," he spat, pointing his trembling hand at the congregation, acting shocked, clutching your pearls, whispering behind your hands. "But you all knew. You knew where the money came from. You knew why the Parkers suddenly had power, why they could fund events, buy silence, hold their heads high while others starved." Gasps rippled like a wave. Guests turned on each other, whispers rising, accusations already forming. "You, Mr. Carter?" Pastor Green barked, pointing at a man in the third pew, his face red and slick with sweat. "You took their money to expand your business. You smiled in Lauren's face while mocking her fiancé behind her back." The man stuttered, his wife grabbing his arm, but the crowd's eyes had already cut into him like knives. "And you, Mrs. Whitmore," the pastor shouted, his voice echoing off the stained glass windows. "You accepted donations for your son's scholarship, money soaked in greed and lies." Mrs. Whitmore gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "That's not true. I didn't know." But her protest was drowned out by the roar of voices around her. The church was chaos again. People stood, shouting, some defending themselves, others pointing fingers. The neat rows of family and friends had turned into a battlefield, each pew erupting with noise. I clutched Noah's hand, my heart hammering, my mind spinning. This wasn't just about my parents anymore. It wasn't just about Ashley or Pastor Green. This was bigger, far bigger. My whole community was stained. The very people who had laughed at me, who had sneered at Noah, who had told me I was lowering myself by marrying him, they were all tangled in the same corruption, feeding off it, pretending their hands were clean. Ethan stepped forward, his voice slicing through the chaos. "This is what happens when lies rot long enough. They spread. They infect everyone. And now the infection is out in the open." The officers moved toward Pastor Green, but he laughed bitterly, a sound that sent chills up my spine. "You think arresting me will end this? No. This whole town is built on secrets." And today, his voice rose, manic, wild. "Today the walls come down." And with that, he did something no one expected. He grabbed the edge of the pulpit and heaved it forward. The heavy wood crashed onto the marble floor, the sound deafening. Papers, candles, and glass scattered across the altar. Screams erupted as guests surged back, knocking over pews, clutching children, rushing toward the doors. Officers tackled Pastor Green to the ground, his shouts muffled as they forced his arms behind his back. But the damage was already done. Panic filled the church like smoke, choking, blinding, unstoppable. In the middle of the chaos, Noah pulled me close, his voice steady in my ear. "Lauren, listen to me. This isn't just about them anymore. This is about you. About us. About whether you'll let their poison break you, or whether you'll rise above it." Tears blurred my vision. "But Noah, it's my family. My church. My whole life. It's all lies." He cupped my face, his eyes fierce and unshakable. "Then let's build something new. Something real. They try to shame us, but now their shame is burning them alive. And we will walk out of here stronger than ever." The guests sat stunned, pale, silent. No one laughed anymore. No one whispered cruel jokes. Their eyes were downcast, ashamed, some even weeping. The mighty had fallen, and the ones they mocked now stood tall. Noah turned to me, his hand finding mine, his eyes glistening. "I told you, Lauren. I promised you truth. I promised you safety. And I promised to stand with you no matter what." My tears spilled over, but this time they weren't only from pain. They were from relief, from love, from the fire of justice finally burning bright. I looked at him and whispered, "And you kept every promise." The pastor, the Parkers, the mayor, they would all face justice now. Their empire of lies had crumbled, and the world had seen it with their own eyes. The music had stopped, the vows hadn't been spoken, but Noah and I stood at that altar, stronger than ever. And as the shattered glass glistened on the floor, catching the sunlight like 1,000 tiny flames, I knew this was only the beginning. Because this wasn't just a wedding. This was revenge. This was rebirth. This was love unbroken.